Welcome to the wrap-up with Kieran. He'll just be around. He does not want to be held right now. Donna's nearby as well, so is Putao, so we'll see what the chaos is. And we're just going to do a wrap-up where I read 14 books this month, which, not the most books I've ever read in a wrap-up, but it's the most pages. I'm like over 6,000 pages. And audiobooks are the winners. And so a lot of these are for my Goodreads Choice Awards Challenge. I'm going to later this week go through all of the books for the Goodreads Choice Awards Fantasy, all 20, which I will have read and have opinions on. And I'm going to look at the winners and the rankings, have my own rankings, talk about what's represented, what's missing, etc. But this is just going to be my thoughts on books that I read this past month, a lot of them being on that list, because I'm just not going to change that up. I'm just not going to be reviewing or responding to these books as in-depth in that facet when I do my Goodreads project, because I have a different idea for that whole thing. So, and we're just going to do this in order today of how I read them. And maybe I'll bring up if I would have DNF'd if it wasn't for a project. Because there's a non-zero number of them. There are a few books on this list that weren't for a project, but the vast majority were for this project. And only one book on this list is not a 2023 release. So if you were looking for opinions on 2023 releases, I got you for this video. Oh, and Donna's nearby, so you can see her real quick too before we get into it. Donna girl, she's so pretty. She's becoming such a sweet little lady. Okay. Wayward. First one I read because I thought it would be in the fantasy category. It's very popular. Apparently, powers that be decided it's historical fiction. A third of this book is in the present day. Whatever. I also see the argument that it's not, like, witchy enough, but, like, have you seen the Goodreads Choice Awards list? I mean, it fit in with some of the other books that they have going on there. Regardless, I read this. I would have DNF'd it if it wasn't for a project because it was fine. But I was largely just not interested. Granted, I had the time to listen to it, so it wasn't like a big deal. But it has 3 perspectives, and one of them was kind of interesting to me, and the other 2 were like fine. The connections were fairly obvious. The themes on feminism were things that I've seen before, and it leaned a lot into trauma. And when I want to read about feminism as like the main focal point, I like it more from a systemic outlook and less from like an individual's outlook. And like, I don't know, I don't feel, I think, as uplifted as this book makes me want to feel, because it just feels like I'm watching cycles of abuse that never end. And honestly, it's a quite forgettable for me. Like, I truly like can't latch onto it. That said, I mean, I read a lot of books, but I don't even remember the names of all these people. I think one of them was Violet. And then Kat maybe was the present day one. And then I want to say Agatha, but maybe that's just me being like, that's an older name and witchy stuff. Regardless, it's a book. I read it. The next one is one that I really liked. This is the only one that's not 2023. And that's Fool's Quest, second book in the last series in Realm of the Elderling. And yeah, I mean, I like the first book in the series more still. But I read like the last third of this over the course of a long drive I had earlier this month, and normally I can't be that focused or engaged in one thing. It's like a pretty long drive, like 9 or 10 hours, and normally I need to switch between things to keep my brain engaged, keep myself awake. I was so invested in where this story was going that I was just like, I guess even though this audiobook sucks, and it does. Oh, I don't like this audiobook. I needed to know what would happen next, and I couldn't physically read, obviously, while I was driving. So it speaks very highly to the content of the story that I pushed through a pretty mediocre audiobook and did it for that really long drive to finish it up. Still need a third book. It's still a cliffhanger, etc. I also finished Atalanta, which did make it to the Goodreads Choice Awards list, so thank goodness, because oh my god, is this the most Greek retelling book I have read in a while. And I've been reading a few of those lately. It's Atalanta. Like, I guess, yes, we're focusing on her and not Jason in terms of the quest for the Golden Fleece. That's different. We get to see how she was raised, so origin story of a hero. It's so formulaic. And as I've talked about a lot this past month, the formula of a Greek retelling, not vibing with it these days. Especially because it kind of feels like, for like superhero example, when you are watching Spider-Man movies, if you like Spider-Man, it's really cool, but how many times can you watch the same origin story? And yes, people change it up, and yes, it's classic, so sometimes it's cozy, but I thought it was such a breath of fresh air when we had Homecoming, so like no, we have Spider-Man. He's just a person, and now we're doing a different, version of his story. Let's go. We trust that you understand that he has an origin. But with the Greek retellings, we are always starting at an origin. We always have to go through that hero's journey. We always have to see heroes in a negative light that are usually put in a positive light because we're changing the lens, and it's always kind of a baby's first feminism lens, which is not bad. Like, if this is the first time people get to see that story, that's cool. But it's formulaic, and it's not cathartic for me. It's just so aggressively okay. So I would have DNF'd this one. This next one's really good, and it is a new release, but it's not in my category, and this is Vampires of El Norte. I wouldn't say that this is a straight horror. I would say this is like a romance book set in a horror setting. Like, romance horror, is that a genre? I don't know. Like, we have fantasy romance, horror romance. Yeah, this is about Magdalena or Nena and Nestor. Love him. And they were friends. They grew up close together. He was kind of one of the helping hands, though, and she's, like, the heiress of this, I don't know if they call it a hacienda, but it's the ranch and stuff like that. And then something happens, and he runs away because he thinks she's dead, but she's not dead, but that's what he thinks. And then later on in life, their paths cross again, and it's kind of like a second chance romance, friends to lovers, but also, like, aggressively, like, feeling each other out to lovers. It has so many fun tropes, and forbidden love because they're in different classes. Their chemistry is amazing. You get both point of views, so if you like your romances where you get to hop into both point of views, definitely get that here. Nena's a lot, but it makes sense for who she is. Nestor is too hot. Like, he's so attractive. I don't normally feel like a character is attractive, but the way he carries himself, the way he thinks, the way he's described, it's like all facets of hotness. Like, not only is he like a physically attractive person, but it's like, oh, I really like you as like a person. Everything you are is awesome. There's definitely a lot of these people are taking a while to grow out of certain patterns that they have, thought patterns wise. And so that third act breakup sort of section is frustrating. But for me, it did still feel grounded and made sense for the scenario. And it also just has this thematic backdropping of this horror element of this is during the struggle between some land in Texas. I can't remember if it's land that is Texas now or Mexico, but a border dispute there between the Yankees and people who lived in Mexico, and I don't even know if it was Mexico at the time, but regardless, it's 1800s period of Mexico. We have this fight, and there's the supernatural element of the Yankees are using vampires, and it's really interesting how that is kind of done, and that's where the horror is, and there were scenes where I'm like, that is grotesque. But if you've read The Hacienda, which was very like pulpy haunted house, this is not pulpy vampire story. There is a war happening in the background with these supernatural creatures, and it is connected to our characters, but at the core of it, the thing that I hold on to, Nestor and Nena, their romance. All the tropes, the chemistry, the struggles, the banter, the flirting, the I'm not flirting, but I'm flirting. So fun. Okay, Donna's on my notes, so I need to gently move her to see the next book. Don't nip me. So cute. Okay, so now I read Inkblood Sister Scribe. This was a surprising hit for me. Really fun. So we have these two half-sisters. There's this family legacy of magic and books, and one of the sisters kind of ran away from home, and we don't really know why. And we start the book with the father dying, and we also don't know why about that. And we also meet this other person who is a scribe, and there's this secret society of people and books and how magic comes from books. This is definitely a book written for people who like books. That's a theme of Goodreads things. But in general, I read this in a couple days, and I found it fairly engaging. I was invested. I think I've learned a little bit that contemporary fantasy can really work for me. Now, I definitely wouldn't have DNF'd this book if it weren't for this project. I really enjoyed seeing it through the end. Is it an all-time favorite going to stick with me? No, but is it a book I'd maybe recommend to people that I think has some broad appeal? For sure. Because it's contemporary, so you don't have to like really stretch to do intense world building. I think the characters are really easy to root for. And I think it's really readable. Like, for a debut, I thought this was super solid. And especially most people who read like books, so it's good to give to people in your life who like books, but they want something like magic adjacent, but not too much. Donna has only put herself more onto my notepad, so now you get to be on camera while I move the paper. Yes, oh, you're so sweet. Oh, she's so tired. Maybe I can get her to sleep in my lap. All right, this next one. Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab, which I've already talked about a fair bit this past month, or in November, because I did not like this book. Deserves to be on the Goodreads Choice Awards list. That's not what I'm disputing. I do not like this book. I do not enjoy it. I do not like its project. I don't like that we're continuing Darker Shades of Magic, or that if we are continuing it, it's this way. And yeah, I don't vibe with it. I don't like it. I've talked about it a lot. I don't like the flashback nature. I feel like everything's a little too surface level. We've spread ourselves too thin. what is the point of this book other than to set things up? I am not always a big fan of setting things up as your book and that being the only thing that really happens. Like, the internal conflict of this book is so small, in my opinion. Whereas, sure, if you want to do a setup book, then just spend the time actually letting us have catharsis with these characters and getting caught up to present day after all the stuff they have to deal with in the last trilogy. Like, I don't know, I feel like corners were cut, and it was not for me, but full disclosure, V.E. Schwab books, especially secondary world-building books, generally not for me. Pu Tao is annoyed because the kittens are grooming him. So that's what you're hearing. Everything's okay, though, right, everybody? Yeah? Pu Tao's now coming over to me to be saved. So you guys get to see Pu Tao now. This is just a cat video. Forget books. We're just going to talk with cats. Right? Look at him. He's still my favorite boy. Yes, you are. Okay, he's going to be down here in my lap. I will protect you from the kittens who love you too much. Okay, Stoneblind. Next book. Another Greek retelling. Do I like this one more or less than Atalanta? I had a stronger urge to DNF this one, but I think this one had a funnier narrative voice. That said, I was bored to tears. Like, truly, I don't care. Like, and I like the Medusa myth and Perseus's quest, but oh my goodness. This book was short and it couldn't have ended fast enough. I just didn't want it. And again, chalk this up to everything I said with Atalanta. The formula of a Greek retelling, it's just not for me. I just do not care. The one thing that is unique about this one that I like versus other Greek retellings is you get narrative perspectives of the Olympians. And they are written with the pride and hubris you would expect of Olympian gods. So I think that was really well done. I do, like I said, certain chapters have unique narrative perspective and voices. I think that's interesting. But in terms of what are we doing with this story? Like, Medusa was wronged. Shocking. I don't know. It's just not that interesting to me. Perseus, not that great a hero. Again, what, I don't know. I don't know why it was made other than to be entertainment for people who like this formula, which is enough of a reason to exist, but not enough of a reason for me to like it, if that makes sense. So, moving on, we have another fun surprise hit, though, and that is Venco, another contemporary fantasy, and this one is by an Indigenous Canadian author, and our main character is Indigenous and Canadian, I believe in Toronto. That feels like the right city that I'm making up here. And one day she finds this spoon, and the spoon connects her to all of these other people in a coven, and the whole point of the book is that they have to find the last member of the coven in X amount of time, so countdown plot. There is a nefarious foe out there trying to stop the coven from forming, and the best part, though, is that our main character has to do this quest with her grandmother, who is a gem. Oh my goodness. So we have a grandmother and granddaughter duo going on this quest, meeting other women, kind of feeling a sense of community and connection, because the feminism in this is truly not, like, groundbreaking, but it at least is about systems and communities. It's more intersectional. So, I mean, it's still, like, not, like, the deepest way of approaching this theme that I've ever seen, but it's at least more involved than other books that I've talked about in this video. And I just loved the I don't even like traveling stories, but I loved the traveling story with these two characters. Especially because it also, there's these heartfelt moments because this grandmother's fairly old. She raised this granddaughter because her mother was not in the picture, but now roles are reversed where the granddaughter has to take care of her grandmother because her memory isn't what it used to be. She can be of harm to herself and others. So you have that emotional tension there, but there is still this love and camaraderie and joy, and it was great. I really liked it. I wish it was prettier. Like, I think I was told that actually the pretty cover is not even a UK cover. I think it's only the Canadian cover. I didn't even know Canada got their own special covers sometimes. But regardless, the one that we have been having in the United States is boring. It's very boring. But that was a nice surprise hit. And then I went and I read Bookshops, and Bone Dust. This one kind of made me realize that this and Legends and Lattes are cozy fantasies. Legends and Lattes is kind of like the Hallmark movie, we're building a business sort of thing. And this one's kind of, this person is forced to relax for like a month and help someone with their business. I think it's like a different Hallmark movie, and this formula of it is just not my favorite. I think it was interesting, and I don't think for me there weren't stakes. I think there were definitely stakes in terms of Viv and this portion of her life. I'm very much a person where, like, it is interesting to look into people in different moments and how it can affect them and change them. So for me, like, there were enough stakes. I just think that I liked the whole conceit of we're building a business to be more interesting than this, which wasn't quite all about reviving a business. It was kind of about that, but it was also about there's this nefarious foe around. What's happening? Oh, you are also recovering from this injury, and like, oh, you're also falling in love with this person that you know you won't be with. Like, there were a lot of things that I think it needed more focus for me to, I think, be completely engaging, but it was not a bad book by any means. Okay, 5 more books. The Will of the Many. I really liked this one. I'm going to continue in this series when we get the second book. When I finished this book, I immediately went to the author's website and was like, so when's the second book coming out? Because if you've read the epilogue, you know. Like, how dare? How dare? Now, I did need to listen to the audiobook for this to be truly invested, because this is an author who loves detailed descriptions. And I'm not a big detailed description girly. It's just not my thing. I don't need to see how the cliffs are looking. I don't need to hear the water hit the shore. Like, I don't need any of that. This author, it's very obvious that Robert Jordan, Tolkien, they are his inspirations. He writes a little like them in terms of description. That said, I did enjoy our main character, Viv. His backstory, his morals, I think for a first-person book, he was a fairly easy character to follow. He wasn't super annoying to me in any way. He felt grounded enough. I liked the school setting. I like the friendships that are formed. I'm always nostalgic for that. I do think, although this is fantasy, and it's secondary world fantasy, it feels like a science fiction book. And I don't know how to describe that, other than I can trope relate this more to science fiction books I've read than I can to fantasy books I've read, even though the actual will system is fantasy. Maybe because it's used in a very direct technological way. I'm unsure. And it's very thematic, blatant theming here about societies and the complicity of others on the bottom. Like when you have a hierarchy, corrupt system, how complicit are those at the bottom who allow people to stand on their shoulders, and allow in quotes, right? So I think that's a conversation I'm curious to see how we unpack that as we go, because I predict this is going to fall into that traditional fantasy series route of interesting societal commentary at the beginning, and then we have to deal with a big bad, and so we get to just shove that away and focus on the big bad. And I already see that starting to happen, but that said, I kind of want to learn about that big bad, so for the coolness factor, I'm here for it. Victory City, another fun little surprise for me. So this is my first by this author, who is fairly well known in literary fiction spaces. He's a literary fiction author who dabbles in magical realism. I would make this more similar to like the Greek myth-telling space, where it's like a historical fantasy. And it's pulling from origin stories and legends of a certain area, that this how it makes its myths. Because like a lot of Greek stories are about how did Athens get formed, how did Sparta get formed, and we're looking at these legendary people that might or might not have been real people or related to real people, sort of thing. And so similarly here, we're looking at a area, I think in southern India, and its origin story, and I think it's mostly inspired by some text, but also made up, and I think part of what makes this work for me is because it is a lot of its own artistic liberty, so it felt very unique and grounded in that way, and I really liked the narrative voice. And I liked that it was focused on kind of both the community and how the community changed over time, in addition to this larger-than-life character who was writing this story and who was like embodied by a god, so got to live for hundreds of years longer than normal and be influential at different points in the history of this city. So I enjoyed that. I liked the writing a fair bit. This did convince me that I want to read more by this author, because in a literary fiction space, I enjoyed the prose. Like, I don't know if they were groundbreaking, but they were not a hindrance, and I was fairly engaged. I wanted to know what would happen next. Do I think this should have been on the fantasy list for Goodreads Choice Awards? More so than other books on the list, but also no. I do think there are not enough fantastical elements for it to feel like a fantasy book to fantasy readers, if that makes sense. Like, it feels more like a creation myth, which I feel like most people don't consider creation myths or these type of things to be fantastical. Like, I don't know. That's just my opinion. The next one was Starling House by Alexi Harrow. This is probably my favorite Alexi Harrow. This is contemporary fantasy gothic. Yes, that's what we'll call it. There is a house, and it calls to people, and it calls to our main character. And so she ends up going there, and she is poor. Triggers for being poor and being stressed and having to work too many part-time jobs, taking care of her brother, all that stuff. I was stressed at the beginning of this book. And maybe that's because my life is financially uncertain all the time. And it's like, I'm stressed about finding all of my part-time jobs. Shush. I don't want to deal with it. That said, I listened to this in one day because I had like hours to be on the EM scope. And so I consumed this. And it was fun. I mean, I don't know how much it will stick with me. And I do think Alex E. Harrow is one of those authors with her heart in the right place when it comes to the themes she wants to write about. But she always kind of doesn't hit the mark, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think she does anything harmful or bad, but it always feels like, I don't know, not quite enough. Like, you have the disability representation in her Sleeping Beauty retelling that's only okay. There's a lot of discussion about January and the Thousand Doors of Januaries and her racial representation. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about the feminism rep in the Witches book. I haven't read that one. I've only read Thousand Doors of January, the Sleeping Beauty retelling, and this one. And, like, this one, I think a lot of it's done pretty well, but then there are a lot of thematic things that are brought up, almost felt like, okay, I have to recognize that this place was really bad to a lot of people and really racist, but we're also, like, not quite going to, like, flesh it out. It felt a little odd. I don't know. And, like, it also felt very, like, accurate, but surface level is probably what I would say. Especially with her brother, the inclusion of the character of the brother. I think she's not black or mixed or anything like that, but her brother is. And that affects how he exists in the world, especially as a bright student, and she's trying to get him out of this town and going to another school, and there's a whole discussion around that. So I don't think she does anything bad. I just feel like she never quite hits the mark in a way that feels 100% okay for me, and part of that's probably just that, like, when she's writing about her lived experiences, I think it works so well that you can tell when it's not lived experiences, because I do feel like this place in Kentucky and the authors from Kentucky felt very well realized. I felt like I was in a town that was left behind when industry left, that has been taken advantage of by corporations, so it ruins the land and the water. Like, I felt all of that. Felt all of that very acutely. There is a romance in this, and I can't decide even days later if it lands for me. But I don't know. I think it's fine. I think it probably has a better chance of winning than I expected, but I wouldn't want it to win of all the books I've read. Like, of all the contemporary fantasies I've read, this one's the one that was least exciting for me, I think. All right, next one is Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare. I was shocked. So if you don't know, I started my Goodreads projects with that young adult Goodreads series, and I read a bunch of Cassandra Clare for that. So in the past calendar year, I have read like 12 Cassandra Clare books, including this one. Okay, I've read a lot. And this feels different. This is not a Shadowhunter book. This is a different book. These characters are different. The way we are focusing on character interactions are different. This world is different. Like, Shadowhunter is historical and present day, but it's all our world. It's not secondary world. This is its own secondary world. Like, I'm not saying it's great, per se. Like, I enjoyed it. I'm intrigued. I want to see where it goes. But it's not a romance. There's minimal angst. There's some pining, some flirting, but that's not the focus whatsoever. But it's just really different. I feel like lately, whenever we've had the crossovers of young adult to adult, we've had a lot of, like, you can see the fingerprints of the author's original writing in young adult coming through. But here, it didn't feel like a Cassandra Clare book to me, which in some ways is nice and refreshing, but in other ways it's like, but I wouldn't have minded if you brought more of that camp over, because I feel like she's good at camp. I am intrigued about the next books in the series. This is a classic setup book, which I liked. I mean, I liked reading it until I realized there would no universe in which I'd have a satisfying ending. So that kind of brings it down a tiny bit for me, but I'm very invested in these characters. I want to see what they do next. I want to see what happens in this world next. I'm curious about it. I don't think it's groundbreaking. I don't think it's doing things you haven't seen before, like, to the point where... This is bananas to me, guys. Okay, this is absolutely bananas to me. I would say that Cassandra Clare and V.E. Schwab, Leigh Bardugo, they all have similar fan bases, right? Like, there's some overlap in that Venn diagram of people who like Leigh Bardugo, V.E. Schwab, and Cassandra Clare. Not 100%, but for sure, when you are creating character names and doing things in books and pulling from tropes, I think it would be smart to look at what other authors who are popular in a sphere are doing. And if you don't know, in Darkest Shades of Magic, a character's name is Kell. He is a bodyguard-type character, brother figure to the prince of this region, okay? And his life is inexplicably tied to this prince. And it's an odd power dynamic because, like, he didn't really get to choose that life, but they are still like this brother-brother relationship, even though the power dynamic's weird. Okay, that's like a big point of Darker Shades of Magic. Swordcatcher. The name Swordcatcher is about a swordcatcher, this person who's meant to pretend to be the prince, to take the sword for the prince, etc., etc. The main character's name is Kel. I think the full name is Kellyan or something like that, but he's called Kel 90% of the time. And he is the swordcatcher for the prince, and they are like brother-like figures. He's literally like a bodyguard figure for this. Like, the trope itself is not my problem. It's a fairly common enough trope, whatever. Orphan kid taken advantage of by the royalty, power dynamics, like that's all normal. Kel? We had to use Kel twice. And maybe it's because I've read Fragile Threads of Power the same month, but I'm like, first of all, I need people to stop using Kel as a name in fantasy books because, like, we now have too many of them. And K names are not just unique because we don't use K that often. Like, find other letters and names. But did no one read this book and tell her, hey, this is, like, really similar to this character and this trope that's used in this other very popular fantasy book? Like, I don't even like Darker Shades of Magic, but it's very popular. Like, incredibly. So anyways, that's my only gripe. Because otherwise, I mean, these characters themselves, these two Kels, are not the same. Like, at all. And then the last book we'll talk about, and came right in under the wire, is The Unmaking of June Farrow. I read this for the fantasy Goodreads Choice Awards. It's not a fantasy book. At all. I fight me. This is not a fantasy book. Like, no. No. If this is a fantasy book, Dark Matter by Blake Crouch is a fantasy book. You have to pick. We can't keep doing this to me. This is more of a gothic suspense and its supernatural, it's not even supernatural, its speculative element is science-y. And I don't know if I should say more than that, even though it's like blatantly obvious what's happening very early on, but I don't remember what's on the back of the book. But I think this is classified as fantasy because it is about a family of women who are cursed. But the curse itself is not magical. Like if this was about men, it would, like, literally we've had books like this, it would be a sci-fi book. That's my opinion. Yes, maybe because it spends time in a historical portion of it, because it's like contemporary and historical, maybe that makes people think more fantasy, because we are incapable as a society to think of historical science fiction. Like, we are incapable of such things. Sometimes we can do it, like, with our calculating stars and stuff like that, but sci-fi implies future, not past, to a lot of people. That said, I would have DNF'd this book. I was so not interested in what this book was doing. And I was reminded, actually, because... and this is how you know it's science fiction. I was watching a Doctor Who episode last night that was using a lot of similar tropes, and I'm like, yeah, this is the good version of this. This is the good version, not this. It's okay. It's okay. There's a romance in it. I assume you like it more if you like the romance. Otherwise, it's boring. It's aggressively boring and fine, and it's not a fantasy book, and I am mad that it was nominated for a fantasy category. And I don't know. I'm not picking up another book by this author. Like, I know there are other books. I was not enthralled by this project. I don't think this is the author's fault. Authors are not involved in marketing or where their books are classified. Like, I think for the speculative elements she played with them fairly well. Honestly, I think she did her speculative elements better than what Blake Crouch has done with his speculative elements and recursion and dark matter. So, like, I think, actually, that part's not what bothers me. What bothers me is that I was reading this for a fantasy award, and this is not a fantasy book. Like, no. No, it's not. It's just not. It's just not. Okay, well, those are the 14 books that I read, and we will discuss the actual, like, Goodreads Choice Awardness later this week, because I will finish the last 3 books that I'm reading for that, and we'll talk about all of them together, what's represented, how I felt about the project, what my ranking is versus the ranking of, like, what gets voted for and how the votes play out. It should be a fun time. And if you want to leave any opinions about the books, do that down below. If you want to leave an emoji to let me know you're here. Oh, I do not know. I do not know. I feel like there's a lot of Greek things, but I don't know if there's, like, a Greek related... I mean, there's a Greek flag, obviously, but I don't know if there would be, like, pillars or columns. I feel like that would have been cool for, like, the Will of the Many and Greek things, so we won't do that. There's a lot of birds, too. So we'll do a bird, because we got starlings, and we got the bird in the Venco cover, and stuff like that. And otherwise, like if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!